If you're looking for a video on what it's like to camp at Acadia National Park, this one is chock-a-block full of information that maybe even some of the park rangers don't know. So, I hope you'll join me as we explore not only what it's like to camp, but some of the things to do on this episode of Campgrounds with the Yankee Camper, Seawall Campground. Without a doubt, Acadia National Park is one of my favorite places on earth. This is where I spent the end of summer as a child for my dad's 2-week vacation. Acadia is the bar by which I measure all other New England parks and campgrounds. The facts are, however, there are bicyclists and backpackers, Bar Harbor traffic, and boorish tourists. If only there were a more relaxed place to stay. Shall we call it the quiet side of Acadia? Somewhere there's a natural seawall along the ocean where one can have a picnic and watch the waves, and the National Park Service has created just such a place, named for that very seawall. One of the park's often overlooked features that quietly competes with Thunder Hole, the autoless carriage roads, the Jordan Pond popovers, and the pink granite of Otter Cliffs is a half-mile sea barrier of rocks and boulders, built not by machines or men, but by the hands of God. Across the street is the second oldest campground within the confines of the park itself, named for that surf bastion. Plans for the Seawall Campground were first set to paper around 1935, taking advantage of the young men participating in the Civilian Conservation Corps, one of President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal programs. This places the history of Seawall in the pre-World War II era, as interest in finding low-cost getaways skyrocketed during the Depression. In the amenities segment, I'll explain why this campground feels so different from most others, and it's something you'll want to know before booking. There are 202 individual campsites broken into 4 loops. There's also 5 large group campsites, bringing the total to 207. It should be noted that all of these are dry camping only. If you're in an RV, you must be fully self-contained. It also should be noted that generators are restricted to Loop C only and are allowed from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning and 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. in the evening, a rule I wish all campgrounds would institute. For a campsite at a premier national park, the cost is incredibly reasonable, but it can get a little convoluted, so if you're thinking of going, pay attention. If you have a Senior America the Beautiful Pass, you can cut these costs in half. There's also a single $8 booking fee, which the America Beautiful Pass does not apply to. Regular sites in loops A, B, and C are $30 per night for up to 6 people. Loop D also allows up to 6 people for only $22, but there's a catch. Loop D consists of walk-in tent sites only. 1 RV site plus a tent is allowed, but only on loops A and C. 2 tents are allowed on loops B and D. No RVs are allowed on these campsites. Only 1 vehicle per site is allowed. Additional vehicles must park in the overflow parking area. If you're towing a dinghy, or a toad as RVers often call it, both the RV and the vehicle must fit completely on the site. Otherwise, the second vehicle must be parked in the overflow area. If you're over 62, I can't recommend enough getting a Senior America the Beautiful Pass. A single year is $20, a lifetime pass is $80, but the annual passes accumulate toward the lifetime pass. Plus, park access fees are waived throughout the rest of the park. When you book, you'll need to enter your America the Beautiful pass number. Then, when you arrive, be prepared to show the pass along with a matching photo ID. If you need to cancel or change, there'll be a $10 fee. If you don't show and don't call, Seawall will release your entire booked time frame the following day at 10 a.m. It's that much in demand. Although same day booking is allowed, walk ups are not. Of course, you could park across the street and book a site, but that's real gambling. These sites fill up fast. All booking must go through recreation.gov, and 90% of the sites are released exactly 6 months in advance on the first day of the month. So all of July's dates are available at 10 a.m. on February 1st. The remaining 10% are released on a rolling basis 14 days prior. There's also a restriction of 14 consecutive nights and no more than 30 nights per year. That's a lot of rules, but remember, you're competing not just regionally, you're against the whole nation and even internationally. Be sure to do your homework. If you have a question and you're not sure who to ask, please ask me. Pets are welcome. This is even considered one of the most dog friendly parks in the National Park Service. But the normal rules apply. Animals must be kept on a physical leash or restrained in a cage at all times. The leash can be no longer than 6 feet. Pets cannot be left unattended at your campsite, inside a tent, or inside a parked vehicle at any time. If you leave the campsite to go on a hike or a tour, you must take your pet with you. And lastly, campers are legally required to immediately pick up and properly dispose of all pet waste in the campground's designated trash receptacles. Because it's so quiet, it's a great place to set out in the dark, keeping in mind your fellow campers are still sleeping, for one of Acadia's classic experiences, watching the sunrise from atop Cadillac Mountain. I was blessed to have perfect weather for my ascent by car to experience the dawning of a new day at the top of the highest point on the Atlantic coast. During parts of the winter, it's the first place in the United States to see the sunrise. When I visited in early June, that distinction belonged to Lubec, but that's hardly the point. This mountaintop has been a special place long before hikers, tourists, or even European explorers first laid eyes on it. Even today, the summit remains a place of reverence and awe. As the clock approaches the time listed in the almanac, a hush befalls the crowd. As many as 250 people turn eastward in quiet, reflective anticipation. As the orange peaks over the distant island, subdued exclamations are whispered, but conversation remains reflective and reverent. The native Wabanaki, who called themselves the people of Dawnland, felt this emotion, naming the mountain Wapawak, meaning the mountain of first light. By the mid 19th century, artists began capturing the beauty of Mount Desert Island, and this helped pave the way for college educated Easterners to fancy themselves outdoorsmen, becoming known as rusticators. By the late 1800s, Yankee locals were competing against corporate Gilded Age capitalists to get the increasing influx of tourists to the top. The locals used a buckboard dirt road to make the ascent, while corporate moneymakers built a cog railway. The competition got to the point where the railway owners grew desperate and actually tried blowing up the gravel path with dynamite. But the Downeasters got the last laugh as the railway went belly up in 1895, and portions of the original buckboard road have been paved and are now part of the access road to the summit of Cadillac Mountain. My parents were married in September of 1952. My father brought his new bride to his special place, staying with family in Lemoyne. My mom, who was 17 at the time, had never been out of Massachusetts before and wondered, why would anyone come to this burned out place? You see, this devastating fire of 47 had scorched the top and a great deal of the surrounding landscape. When the smoke finally cleared, much of the summit had been laid bare. Today, the forest has returned, but the open summit and expansive views are still part of that fire's legacy. The visitor's experience from the peak these days grew from that scorched earth devastation. Even now, if you know what to look for, there are gentle reminders. And yes, my mother did come to appreciate the Acadia area as much as my dad did. And the reason is evident. Here is where the mountain meets the sea. The indigenous people recognized it, as did the early visitors. However, they stood atop Green Mountain, a beautiful view with an uninspired name. In 1918, before the park became known by its familiar name, the land mass was renamed to honor the French explorer and adventurer who had been granted a large tract of Mount Desert, including the mountain. By this time, the area had been well established as a vacation spot, and the early well to dos were being replaced with travelers coming by automobile. John D. Rockefeller Jr. created a system of roads forbidding the use of these loud, smelly, newfangled contraptions. The MDI Yankees were put off at the time because they wanted the newer vehicles, but the carriage roads have become an enduring feature, now beloved by their descendants. And still, people wanted to get to the top, as they do now. The growth of the park, along with easier travel, created a problem with overcrowding in the early dawn. While COVID precautions were still fresh, it was clear that something had to be done, and the present-day system was instituted. Only 150 vehicles are allowed on any given morning. This controls the overcrowding, and tickets must be purchased in advance through recreation.gov. The cost is $6, with 30% being available 90 days before, which disappear rapidly. And the remainder are released 2 days prior, which are also snapped up shortly after becoming available. Planning ahead gives you the best chance of securing a golden ticket to see the sunrise from the summit. I booked mine using the 90-day release, but securing a spot is no guarantee of a view. The top is notorious for clouds and fog. Tickets are required for daytime admission as well. For this adventure, I was up at 2:30 a.m. and arrived around 3:40, about 10 minutes after the booth's gates were opened. And you still have to pay the park entrance fee if you don't have a park pass. I found a spot and was able to establish a wonderful viewpoint to capture the moment. If you can, I can't express enough how moving the experience can be. It can make you feel humbled in a way that creates true appreciation for our amazing world. You might even say the experience was lit. Now you know. Okay, let's get back to the campground amenities. I hope you're finding this video interesting, and I'm really happy to put them out. Not as happy as having a cup of coffee, however. If you'd like to support my channel, you can buy me a cup. I'll put a QR code right here and the link right here. Thank you for watching. Now let's get to the next segment in the video. Seawall's amenities are fewer than those found at many campgrounds, but they're not unusual for a national park campground. The toilets are centrally located, clean, and have running water for sinks and flushing. The men's room had 2 stalls and 2 urinals. The stalls themselves were neat and tidy, and one of them even had a fold-down baby changing table. There's no hot water, but there is hand sanitizer and coat hooks with some electricity available next to a shelf. I stayed in Loop A. A look at the map shows there's a different feel at Seawall, and once you understand the history, you'll know why. As the boom for outdoor car camping exploded, the National Park Service had an ecological crisis on their hands. Outdoor enthusiasts were loving the outdoors to death. This first started to appear in the 1920s when well-meaning visitors were tramping on the soil of California's forests. They compacted the dirt into something akin to cement, suffocating the fragile roots of the amazing sequoias they'd come to admire. The U.S. Department of Agriculture had Dr. Emilio Meineke on staff as an expert in these giant trees. The National Park Service not only adopted some of Dr. Meineke's ideas, they borrowed the man himself to address the issues. Meineke successfully stabilized the environment by instituting strict rules as to where vehicles could actually drive and park. By the mid 1930s, the National Park Service was in the process of implementing Meineke's guidelines at the biggest national parks in the nation to ensure that vehicles and campers were in tune with their natural surroundings, not killing them. As Acadia expanded to accommodate the influx of camping guests, the two campgrounds being built were fully in line with Meineke's recommendations. This means that Seawall and its sister campground in Acadia, Blackwoods, were designed before World War II using Meineke's recommendations to help minimize the ecological impact on surrounding vegetation while affording campers a better sense of privacy. Roads, campsites, paths, and facilities all reflect this philosophy in their layout. It proved so successful that the National Park Service adopted it as a model for campgrounds across the country in the mid 1930s and still uses an updated version of this system today. As a matter of fact, so much of the original design is still intact that in 2007, the National Register of Historic Places recognized Seawall Campground as an outstanding example of historic national park campground design. This matters because loops A and B are part of the original design. Loop A accommodates both tents and small pop-up or teardrop trailers up to 20 feet, while Loop B is reserved for tents only. Both loops provide on-site parking, unlike Loop D, which is tent only. There, getting your gear to your campsite requires walking along footpaths, although wheelbarrows are available to help move your equipment. Loop C is designed specifically for RVs over 20 feet, but no longer than 35 feet. These are pull-through sites with many angled to the parallel road. Tents aren't prohibited, but the campsites are closer together with less privacy. This is also the only loop that allows generators, although with restrictions. If you're tent camping but need power for something like a CPAP machine, these sites are your only option. I was able to recharge my power station using solar panels, but I had to move them during the day to maintain optimal charging. As mentioned, Loop D, tents only, feels different because it was designed as part of a program called Mission 66. This was a 10-year plan recognizing that, after World War II, more families were getting outside and the National Park Service was trying to meet that growing demand. At many parks, this meant expanding RV camping. Since Seawall already had Loop C for RVs, Loop D made it possible to add nearly 100 campsites with minimal impact on the surrounding natural environment. It was during this phase that the amphitheater was also built. We'll loop back to that when we talk about things to do in and around the campground. Each loop has fresh water spigots scattered throughout, but there's no H2O at the individual campsites. You'll need to bring water back to your campsite in a container for tasks such as washing dishes or grooming. As a reminder, there's also no shower facilities within the campground, which I'll discuss in a moment. There are also no dishwashing sinks, and using restroom sinks for washing dishes is prohibited. Instead, campers are encouraged to wash their dishes at their campsite and dispose of the wastewater in designated basins designed to discourage wildlife from visiting after hours. Trash receptacles are located next to the basins and feature complex locking systems to discourage nocturnal visitors such as squirrels, raccoons, and skunks. They also deter bears, although bears are rarely a problem at Seawall. Large dumpsters are available for bulk trash. And speaking of waste disposal, there's a dump station in Loop C for RVs that need to empty and refill tanks during their stay or before moving on. Loop C is also the access road to the group camping area known as Loop G. Before I talk about the shower situation, let me cover wood for campfires. Seawall doesn't sell firewood within the campground itself. The park requests that you purchase it locally to help support the surrounding community. But park rules also require that any firewood you burn be purchased within 50 miles of the campground. Foraging for firewood within this national campground is a federal offense that can carry a fine of up to $5,000. My recommendation is simple. Pay the $5 to $9 at one of the roadside stands on your way to the campground. As previously stated, there are no in-park shower facilities. If you're familiar with federally owned campgrounds, this isn't news. As a matter of fact, only about 1/3 of National Park Service campgrounds offer showers. It's worse for the Forest Service, with only about 10% of campgrounds offering a place to shower. The Army Corps of Engineer sites do much better, with most having that amenity. The good news is that Seawall Camping Supply Store is about a mile away and does offer that service. The showers are coin operated and quarters are available from the clerk. It takes 6 quarters to turn the water on for 2 minutes. As recommended, have another 6 quarters ready. Push in the slider, then drop the next $1.50 into the slots so you can simply reach over and restart the water. Trust me, 2 minutes isn't long enough. The stalls were adequate, and the water was hot enough. The place was clean, so no complaints there. Before I go any further, I want to mention that the gentleman working there was helpful and accommodating, so kudos to the people. The problem is the hours. The store opens at 4 p.m. and closes at 7. The last shower time is 6:30. That's a very small window of time, especially if you're out enjoying the day. Not impossible, but it requires planning. There is a 24/7 shower facility about 12 miles away near Blackwoods Campground, and that may be an option that fits with your plans if you're going that way. I also recommend bringing baby wipes for a quick freshen up. That's how it was done on our schooner trip in Penobscot Bay. Lastly, cell service was virtually non existent. I have Verizon and couldn't even send a text message. None of this is meant to dissuade you from coming, quite the opposite. But it is something you should know before you go. And now let's step away from the campground for a moment and take a look at one of the area's hidden gems before exploring some other things to do around Acadia. Just because the western side of the island is known as the quiet side certainly doesn't mean it's featureless. As a matter of fact, nestled within the town of Tremont is the fishing village of Seal Cove, where there's a museum, not of a nautical nature, but one that recalls the earliest years of motoring on Mount Desert Island. The Seal Cove Auto Museum is a great way to spend a rainy afternoon or just a place to break away from the hustle and bustle of Acadia proper. For more than 60 years, the collection of an avid enthusiast has been available for public viewing in this inauspicious location. Set back from the road connecting the north and the south ends of Mount Desert is a remarkable collection of pre-World War II vehicles that rivals any in New England. As many as 60 vehicles can be ogled over or simply admired for their sophisticated style and use of brass over post-war chrome. There's even examples of hybrid technology, such as the 1901 Hood electronomic steamer made in Danvers, Massachusetts, and several examples of the Knox Manufacturing Company from Springfield, Mass. Even Lewiston, Maine saw early auto building with the 1900s Skeen. Why, even a 1909 Touring Stevens Dorrier was created with an eye towards sportsmen who might be hunting and camping. Of course, there's steam cars built by the Stanley brothers of Maine, but they get their own segment in the future. The museum actually owns two vehicles created by Charles Metz of Waltham. He not only built cars, but started with bicycles. Of course, there's also Fords, Chevys, a Pierce Arrow, and some you've never heard of. There's even a cache of Indian motorcycles. The cost for admission is $10, $8 for seniors, military, including veterans, and first responders. Those under 18 are free. It's open from 10 to 5 daily starting on May 1st through October 31st. Becoming a member will allow unlimited visitations. It's easy to miss, but there's also a replica representing a historical era of the island. In 1908, three local lads used a boat motor and odds and ends lying around to build a loosely termed car of their own. This may sound adventurous, but it may have been mischievous as well. You see, there was a law that had been in place that forbade the use of motor vehicles back then. By the time of the construction, automobiles had already been banned on much of Mount Desert Island for several years. Well, perhaps they were tinkerers, scofflaws, or just boys being boys. Their homemade automobile became another episode in what would be known as the 10-year auto wars of Mount Desert Island, finally ending when the state stepped in. The controversy over horseless carriages, led by many influential summer residents as well as a few locals, eventually inspired Mr. J. D. Rockefeller Jr. to build Acadia's famous carriage roads where automobiles would never be allowed. My opinion is that the auto wars weren't simply about motor cars, looking at which towns allowed automobiles and which didn't, who benefited and who opposed them. I suspect the conflict had as much to do with economics and social class as it did with a Sunday drive. Now, you know. Let me tell you about some other things you can do while staying at Seawall. A main feature of recreation within the campground is the amphitheater. This is where the Junior Ranger program, along with other ranger-led evening events, is held. Programs include presentation on the park's geology, amphibians, and other topics. You should also know that the stage and seating area are about 3/4 of a mile from the parking lot. The walkway is paved and ADA compliant, with a gentle downhill slope toward the seating area. Of course, that means an uphill walk on the way back. The parking lot also serves as the overflow parking for vehicles that won't fit on a campsite. Otherwise, the list of campground recreation is fairly limited. Swimming? No. Fishing? No. Boating? No. There's not even a hiking trail that starts within the campground, although several trailheads with parking are nearby. The free bus service, known as the Island Explorer, also serves the campground with a stop across from the ranger station. Be sure to check its website for operating days, schedules, and seasonal service. Service hadn't started yet when I visited just after Memorial Day. Although the campground doesn't have waterfront access, directly across the street is the actual seawall for which the campground is named. There are picnic tables, a rocky beach, and tide pools to explore. I even filmed an upcoming Making a Mess episode featuring tomato mac and cheese there. Parking seemed plentiful, although the picnic tables became scarce around lunchtime. While you're in the neighborhood, make time to visit the Bass Harbor Head Lighthouse, built in 1858. The beacon was automated in 1974, but it still flashes a red light every 4 seconds to warn passing vessels of the jagged coastline. There's also a nice out and back trail that offers one of Acadia's iconic photo opportunities. It's well worth the short side trip. The last thing I'll mention is the small Dolliver family cemetery alongside Loop A. This is the grave of John S. Dolliver, a descendant of Peter Dolliver from Marblehead, who settled on Mount Desert Island around 1778. The Dollivers became one of the island's well-established families. Among them was a longtime keeper at Bass Harbor Head Lighthouse and the teenage Dolliver associated with one of the island's earliest homemade automobiles. Were they all related? I can't say for certain, but it's a small island. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If it inspired you, please take a moment to let YouTube know by giving it a thumbs up. If you'd like to learn more about the places I camp, the gear I use, the meals I make, and the stories that surround them, be sure to subscribe. I try to publish a new video every week. If you have something you'd like to share, let me know in the comments. Until next time, I hope you get outside, and thank you for watching.